So as we are live now, I'm already talking about one of my favorite pieces of yours, which was not too long ago. It was a 5-part series talk about the myths of parenting. And I want to talk about all of those so much today because I was just saying how relevant they were in my life. And my wife and I read every one of your posts. We love to talk about them. Um, we go back a little ways on Substack, but you and I were engaged with each other's posts. And what's funny is you reminded me of the author of my favorite book on parenting. I've read a lot of books on parenting. My wife does too, and she'll recommend ones to me. And after she finished Good Inside by Becky Kennedy, she's like, Kyle, I know I recommend a lot of stuff to you in parenting, but you have to read this book. I have a new favorite. Oh my goodness. And I read it, and yeah, powerful chapters, takes concepts and paradoxes of parenting and illuminates them so beautifully. She's, of course, humongous now on podcasts, teaching classes, going to Harvard and talking about all kinds of cool things. And just, she doesn't miss as far as I've seen when she's talking about parenting. And I started reading your Substack and felt the exact same way. Like, if there's anyone out there that I've read that blows my lack of hair back when it comes to parenting, it's you and Becky Kennedy. And I reached out and I assumed that you were familiar with her and you had never heard of her. And that blows my mind because how similar both of you are in that you challenge a lot of these myths and a lot of these conceptions and cultural ideas that we've developed over time about parenting, particularly in today's day and age. And you have an awesome account title, which is Unpopular Parent. And with that, I mean, I think it's so appropriately named because it 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 seems unpopular, it seems uncomfortable when you read it, but at the same time, it's so empowering. I'm really curious when you came up with that name, why you came up with that name, and kind of what led to you sharing this wisdom that I look forward to every time you post.
Thank you for all of that, and
Yeah.
such a compliment coming from you. I think I started writing on parenting almost a year ago. It was right at the end of August, and I had left a corporate job. I was working in marketing for a software solutions company, and just really felt the need to do something creative and something for myself. Um, and if I'm being, I mean, I have a kind of a long history of a lot of stories to tell, but I really felt like there was something about our unique family and the way that I have parented that was it's just always slightly different than kind of the mainstream thoughts. And so I thought I would give it a shot, and it's just turned out to be this really amazing experience for me. So Unpopular Parent came, I mean, we were workshopping all sorts of names, and Scout actually um, came up with that. And I think it's the line and the lane that I'm most comfortable with. I typically can see a lot of perspectives and understand and be empathetic about a lot of things, but I really feel comfortable when I'm just right on the fringe of most kind of groups or philosophies. And so um it fit. I wrote about this, but somebody suggested I change it because nobody wants to be unpopular, and my pushback to it is I kind of do want to be unpopular. I don't know. There's critical thinking, and there's so many layers to this. All of our kids are different. We're all different as parents. And so being at the center and having it kind of be smooth and okay and everybody's giving you the thumbs up means you're probably not doing it well, if that makes sense. I think wrestling with all sorts of things is really what parenting is about. And we're talking about the original myth that I started with and the idea of, having it all figured out. And I'm like, the goal is to not have it figured out because every day is going to be new. And so, like, we just got to turn that on its head. You're never going to feel like an expert, and you shouldn't. It's just not how relationships are. I mean, even with you and your wife, tomorrow's going to be different. You got to stay on top of it and be committed to learning about each other at every step of the way. Kids are no different. In fact, they're that on steroids, right? Uh,
Yeah, my wife and I were in a really good place last year. So since then, I haven't talked to her. I assume we're still in the same place. And I'm just
Perfect.
going to
And
keep living passively. We'll be good forever.
I'm sure she's really happy and content too with that.
No, you don't need to check back in after you've done it once, right?
Right. It's just
You said,
emailing me on the side.
you said so much there. And I love it. So, Scout, your 18-year-old, your younger daughter, is the one who
Yeah,
came up with Unpopular Parent.
she did. Yeah,
How cool.
totally. Yeah.
And we'll definitely talk about Scout and Finley, correct?
Yep.
Is
Finley.
your older daughter 20-year-old? And Scout is just leaving your house. So, like this week,
Yeah, and the 8th of August is her move-in date. She's
Okay.
gonna be gone, yeah, next week, so we basically have, like, this 14 days left together, so
Huge transition in life, obviously, where you've gone with, and you've been the primary sole parent of them for a lot of their lives. I mean, my favorite post, number one, that we talked about before we went live, is it is a post because you summarized it, and I don't know, you wrote the captions for the conversation, but it was a conversation that you had with your daughters, and I was a fan of yours already, but clearly that conversation was not prepared. That was you asking them genuine questions and watching them respond in the way that they did and speaking to clearly the concepts that you write about and the seeds that you most likely were intentionally planting throughout their lives flourish as they were talking about the different directions that you parented them and the different situations in their life. It was just like, man, there's the goal right there. And I don't know how that felt for you during and after, but that is success, and that is delayed gratification. I'm sure it's fine. So I'm sure it wasn't obvious as you were doing that throughout their life. And yeah, by far my favorite post of yours to date.
thank you. Yeah, I actually, that conversation is pretty normal for us. I had a real similar conversation with just Scout last night, and that's kinda how we talk, and we when our family dynamic changed, about 10 years ago, a little more than that, and it was just the 3 of us, I sort of flipped everything on its head and kind of things were really out of balance before and just decided that, especially since it was a big deal. I mean, a family breaking up and what they were going through, that I really wanted them to know and feel like they were equally important. The parents aren't more important than the kids aren't more important than the parents. And so we worked really hard those first couple years of just finding that balance and getting into a rhythm of just mutual respect that I think has just been a real gift and a huge payoff. And I think for as intentional and strategic as I have been in certain situations, a lot of this, the credit goes to them. I mean, without their buy-in, this doesn't happen. So, um, sorry, I'm in Texas and we keep getting these weather things all the time now.
Good to go. It's
Yeah.
not a bad reason for you never know when things could change. And obviously Texas just dealt with a big one. So
Yeah.
I'd like to see the weather service responding, but give us more information and prepare accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was 10 years ago, you said that, you're referring to when the divorce was finalized or when the changes took place?
Yeah, the divorce happened pretty quickly. Yeah, and in fact, almost kind of overnight, everything. I mean, there was a lot leading up to it, but the decision needed to be made quickly, just for some safety reasons, and so um, everything just sort of went sideways and out the window. And I think we were living a very typical life, and we everything looked beautiful on the outside. You know, great home. We were involved in all sorts of stuff, and doing a lot of things to work overtime to overcompensate for what was happening behind closed doors. So um, that was a really humbling experience, I think, for me, and also a real eye opening. It's been most of my 20s to 40 feeling like I knew what was up and I was pretty certain about a lot of things. And when everything sort of blew up, I really had to check that certainty, which has been really, ironically, incredibly freeing. I anytime I'm certain about something, I know I'm on the wrong track. Um,
It's such a great trigger to be aware of. Like, "Oh, I have this figured out. Uh-oh, there's a liability.
yeah,
There's gonna be because if you're certain about something, it doesn't require your attention anymore. So then you get complacent, whether
exactly.
it's in your opinions and beliefs or, of course, in your relationships. And that like, I love that when you're certain about something, you know you're on the wrong path. What a great quote.
Yeah.
I don't like that word because even the things that you're certain of, I'm certain I love my wife and my children. I'm certain of that. I'm certain of a few things in this world, but I also know that in that certainty, there is risk because I don't know. I can't control whether or not I get to keep them forever. So premeditating on possibilities or remembering that there's a lot even in that certainty outside of my control. So I can make the most of today because then also I'm certain that I care so much about them. And therefore, what do I stress most about? I stress so much about them all the time. And
Mhm.
that's a lot of what, like, a lot of my writing when it comes to stress management. I try to, like, I have a hard time applying to my life in that domain as a father and a husband because I get in my own way through how much I care. and sympathizing with their hard times. And a lot of the myths that you just wrote about actually relate to that beautifully. Um,
Can you give me an example of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I mean, just very simply, my 3-year-old, who is, so he was my youngest until a few weeks ago when I had my baby girl. And by the way, when Jesse and I talked, and you had
That
beautiful,
was so good.
thank
I
you,
loved that. Yeah,
thank
I
you.
love both of you so much.
Well, right back at you from both of us because I know he would share the same sentiment. But you had that beautiful quote about like we're at two different phases of our life as fathers. His daughter is transitioning out of the house, and I have a daughter who just transitioned into the house. And you're in that phase right now too, with Scout transitioning out of the house, and that's a huge time of change. And change is a death in many ways too. So like a death of a phase of life, and then optimizing that transition, getting used to that change, so you can still be engaged in things that you care about. That I try to reflect on that often too, like not just the literal death that is possible, but also like this phase and all the hard parts of it. Now getting back to my 3-year-old, he's as my wife says, the 3-year-old that's ever been three. And
Mm,
little boy, stereotypical in every way, and he's my mini me, so that maybe that drives me crazy subconsciously too.
absolutely.
But he's just a wild man, and he's all emotional brain like 3-year-olds are. Everything is very significant as soon as he is upset about it. And so he is, while my older son, 5-year-old, was what Becky Kenny would call a deeply feeling kid, where he expresses the largest emotions, the most significant ones when he has them. He doesn't have them as often. And that's both for, we say, he could drive you the craziest, but he could also make you feel the deepest love. He's just not only deeply feeling, but like people feel deeply for him in all ways. But right now at 5, almost 6, we always say we would freeze him. He's just in this like amazing little space of being a helper, being a he calls himself a hero because he saved his brother one time in a parking lot. There was nothing significant around, but his intention was not my safety, his brother, and he's tied on to that identity. Just so many cool things. I could talk for him about another hour and a half about all these amazing things about each of them right now. But James, he persistently is just a challenge that requires some oversight. But at the same time, like that is the phase of life, and relating to the myth of either having it all figured out or I forget how you titled it, but like my kid's hard time doesn't need to be my own. It was number 3, I think, was the one that you
Yeah,
had.
it's not urgent. Every feeling isn't urgent.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like you laughed at some of the principles I talk about for fatherhood. Like I say, number one, if I were going to recommend like how fathers can be successful, is giving a shit and showing up. So just caring and being present when you can be, based on your life dynamics. But number two, that I struggle with, is not giving too much of a shit. Because you care so deeply about this stuff, their urgent needs of a toy not being shared or wanting a treat and then blowing up, getting emotional myself, either at trying to prevent my newborn baby girl from awakening from that, from stressing out my wife, or also just I don't want you to feel bad, so stop being upset. Like I can just suppress your emotions for you. All these irrational things happening because I'm emotional, but just seeing it, pausing, and having some of these mantras or these memories or ideas, and your posts have so many quotes within them. It ties together and flows so well, but also each line, each sentence could be a mantra. And so I have many that I insert in that space, and one of them is like, yeah, this is not an emergency. And it feels like it inside because that's what the stress response does. So I try to apply that to him regularly right now.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's originally and initially that's our job, is to meet those needs, and they potentially are, you know? I mean, and at the same time, I remember so vividly, I Scout was a baby, and I was bathing Finley, and Scout was crying in her crib, and I remember feeling like, how do you be in 2 places at once? Can't leave the kid in the bathtub. It's 2 at the time, and Scout was able to soothe herself, and it out of what I felt like was neglect, you know, and an impossible situation. And that's every parent that has more than, well, any child, because you're being pulled in a different direction. And I think if we can just give kids just take a beat a little bit, then they can build that muscle. And it just, it was, and you know, I didn't do anything on purpose, but I think, and maybe the beauty of having a, you know, busier life or more children than just one, you know, those things kind of naturally happen with subsequent children. I'm sure there's a birth order. philosophy and all of that. But I think it can even happen. We don't want, when you care about somebody, you don't want them to suffer. And so it can be really easy. Well, I also think it is a reflection on us. I mean, when my kids are hurting, sometimes I think, oh gosh, is this something I taught them? Or is this, a behavior or a pattern that they picked up from me? And even if it is, it's their journey, and they've got to figure out, and they're going to work that out in a way that's different than how I've worked it out. And so, and maybe even better. And I think that's one of the things that I have so much admiration for both of my girls. I learned so much about how they approach things. And I think if I were stepping in and we're not allowing them to do that, I would miss out on learning how they think and feel and process experiences.
And
So,
I know with how much I care about them, I would literally die for my kids for
yep.
sure. But like you can take that concept or that certainty and then apply it to situations that like me suffering because they're suffering does not help them. So just because I would go so far as die for their safety, that doesn't mean like because they're having psychologically a hard time that is also something that psychologically I somehow can make more inside of me because of like that martyr syndrome or something that we all have when we care about people. And psychological versus physical safety is a big thing that I try to remind myself of in differentiating because Mary Kate, my wife, and I always tell them our number one job is to keep them safe. But what I really try to reiterate now is we're here to keep you physically safe. Um, Psychologically safe is a different thing. And like my
Mhm.
oldest is old enough now, she's almost 8, to where we're talking about that more because for some reason when I'm around, she's at a different phase of her life, a mommy's girl, a daddy's girl. But when I'm around, she tends to like be a little bit more dependent than things that she's able to do already. And whether I'm enabling that or other aspects of just the dynamics of how we've lived, um, when she starts to have a hard time because I encourage her to do things that she's able to do, and she gets upset that the alarms start going off again. But like you are safe right now. You are physically
Mhm.
safe. And this feels a certain way, and you have these thoughts about it. We are here to help you always, but us helping you isn't necessarily supporting your development to be an independent and resilient girl. Becky Kennedy's my favorite concept from her, which comes across in your writing in every way, is I'm not interested in raising happy kids. I'm interested in raising resilient kids
Yeah.
because happiness is the goalpost for anyone individually or as a leader, which honestly, parenting is just leadership applied to people you care about most in this world. And if
Yep.
you aren't a parent, you're doing the same things. Like your content, you could have unpopular leader. You could have unpopular spouse because a lot of what you're writing about can be applied to relationships and leadership, like any good parenting wisdom out there. But removing yourself from caring so much that you are now emotional, we can't do anything rationally if we are emotional. And
Exactly.
so, how do I differentiate that psychological safety so we can be that model, that role model through these storms? That, yeah, in the grand scheme of things, you're mad that the brother has that one toy that you don't have, even though there's 100 others around you every day. But how do we differentiate those alarms from setting off our own alarms so we can stay the course in what is long days that turn into quick years and then amazing conversations, hopefully when they're 18 and 20, about these little seeds that we plant time and time again that you don't see sprouting yet.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the word picture that really helps me with my kids, and I actually have said this to them a dozen times, they'd roll their eyes if they heard me saying it right now, but I always want them to know I'm right behind them. Sometimes I'm, occasionally right next to them. And a few times I've been out in front of them, but I could count it on one hand. I mean, I think that letting them lead gives them that autonomy and that confidence. And this is the best time and place for them to learn that. We can do, overfunction for our kids and send them out into the world, but the world isn't, they don't care about our kids the way that we do. And so if we can be really strategic about letting them practice, fail miserably, and work through things, go through seasons and challenges. I just think it's the biggest gift we can give them. Then they are prepared. I said this to my kid last night. I don't know a kid that's more prepared. Like, we have no idea what challenges are going to come up, but I have full confidence that she can absolutely crush it. Um, but that's because she's practiced and practiced and practiced. And um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. But it's so hard. And even for efficiency or peace of, you know, harmony. It's so you want to step in and just calm everything down. But
Yeah.
there's no favors in that.
I mean, one of my favorite concepts to talk about as a principle of resilience is support systems, but I really emphasize perceived support systems being probably more important than objective support, not the system, but the act of supporting. And you mentioned that you're always right behind them, sometimes next to them, and a few times out in front of them. But objective support, us coming in and physically or somehow taking over or even working alongside somebody to solve problems, that might be needed sometimes when performance is so degraded, and someone's resiliency is so compromised by whatever's happening that they do need another tier of support. But when you know you've got mom behind you no matter what, not only objectively from whatever the crisis might be, but also just unbiased, unconditional love. No matter the mistake that you made, mom loves you. She is there for you no matter what. She's behind you. You will get through this together. That perceived support is going to encourage resiliency rather than reliance. And utilizing the appropriate support system is imperative for resilience because if you can just solve it on your own, heck yeah. If you need to remember that you got people there so you can take that little bit of calculated risk,
Yeah.
go right ahead, do that. And if you're trying and you're just not able to, ask for help. That's strength too. That's absolutely strength because I'm trying, I'm not getting there. But how do we encourage as parents trying and even failing based on the scale and the safety, psychological safety all day, fail. Physical safety, let's be safe and tier it accordingly to what's appropriate for resilience and not reliance.
I'm so curious how you teach your own kids that the difference between like when to ask for help and how far to push them. I mean, they're young, but they must. I mean, I'm sure they hear your language and what you focus on and how you speak all the time, and that must be ingrained in them to some degree.
Well, they are very familiar with the term mental state.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, the cold, right?
And
Yeah,
my
the jacket. Was it your daughter that talked
yeah,
about the
yeah,
jacket? Yeah,
told her friends being cold is a mental state of the playground, which
yeah,
is
I
funny
love
because
that.
of all the kids that are able to talk, she's the one who does not embody that concept the most. But that is completely okay because she is very resilient in many ways. But my 5-year-old Sam that I mentioned, just across the board, he's made that part of his identity and his attitude. Most importantly, I think for resilience is reflected in your attitude. It's not your competency per se in a particular skill, but it's how you approach it, how you deal with failure, how you bounce back or even bounce forward the more you work on things. And my goodness, does this kid have just a diligent work ethic on anything that he wants to get better at. And a lot of the reasons he wants to get better at certain things right now is to be a better brother and to be a help around the house, and all these beautiful identities that he's taken on. So trying to cultivate identities in our kids in ways that work for them is something that we're actively doing. My daughter has it for sure in things that she enjoys. And to answer your question, it varies based on the kid, right? Because they're so
Yep.
different. Same parents, same environment, incredibly different children with different needs, different learning modes that they prefer, and different types of redundancies that's needed. And I'm not sure I'm doing a great job, but my wife and I talk about this regularly, and maybe we are. I know she is. So I try to emulate my wife and what she does in a lot of these ways too, because I'm guilty more so of that old school toughness sometimes, particularly if I am operating on some base level of stress and being like, "Hey, we just gotta get through this. You're fine. You're safe. I've got you." But and so it's like sometimes I'm shorter than I want to be. Where my wife is just so emotionally present and more patient in these moments. So she she doesn't actually check me, but watching her checks me like, "Oh yeah." And that again, this isn't the emergency. These are these opportunities that I write about all the time. This part of my life, parenting is the most important part of my life. It's without question the most challenging part too for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I I'm really good at showing them things. My wife's really good at explaining them things in the language and at the level that is most appropriate for them. And I think the balance that we deliver that in is working. And we both try to pull from each other to do better in the ways that are our opportunities.
And do you end up tapping out at times and having and swapping and
My wife's really good at that. I'm not really good at that.
okay.
I'm proud, stubborn asshole. And so my wife doesn't I don't tap out, she taps in. And she's
Yeah.
done that for me a few times because I'm I'd like to think I'm a really supportive husband. I know she would say that too, but then sometimes, like, if I'm doing a lot for her and I'm balancing now the 3 kids or before the 2 kids when my son was born, or Evelyn when Sam was born, or whatever I can do, just because 'cause I'm doing all these physical acts and managing all this stuff, if I'm doing it with a bad attitude or I'm causing stress or it's causing disconnection with us, is that really helpful? Yes, in some ways, not so much in others. And that's even, like, what changed our life as a couple, and I'm still have a lot of opportunities here, but when we had our first loss before Evelyn, and I was working full days, training now in mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu, sometimes before and after work, I was still taking care of all the physical acts because she didn't need to do anything, other than wake up and eat. And I was not doing a good job of explaining where I was. She just really needed to connect with me and hear that I was coping too. I was struggling too, and I was doing it in my own way, which is different than her. But also, we just needed to share. We just needed to engage and grow from that, or even just be. We did end up growing for that. That loss had deep meaning for us, and it led to Evelyn, of course, um, and obviously our more recent losses led to Lucy, but a little bit more challenging the most recent one, and harder to have like gratitude around that one. But still, look at Lucy, and she has the same middle name, and we're very fortunate and lucky. But what I was talking about is me showing up for her in ways that is needed is often not more, it's less. It's just presence, being there, hearing her, sharing where I'm at rather than buckling down and just getting things done.
Right. Right. Well, and that seems a little counterintuitive to the resilience work, right?
Yeah,
So how do you marry the two? I mean, how do you've got to have kind of both going on at the same time in your head, right?
for sure. And
Yeah.
she and I talked. So I love that you answered that my favorite post about you and your daughters. While you probably didn't prep them with those questions so they had their answers ready, that conversation wasn't new for you guys because you're having those kinds of real conversations often. And I know, I mean, throughout a lot of my life, having real deep conversations, like philosophical conversations or hard conversations about your past or trying to repair or just addressing opportunities in yourself, each other, and finding ways to approach those uncomfortable conversations, not from a blame perspective, a shame perspective, but just from an opportunity for growth and a way to get better together perspective. And that those are it's hard to have other conversations than that these days. I love deep conversations, and we have those quite often. My wife and I, we're having them more with our kids when they're ready and trying to get better at delivering that to each one or them together when it's appropriate. Because we talk about this stuff all the time. So I've gotten much better, but it is still my biggest opportunity. And I wrote a piece recently that a buddy's going to post on his page at some point soon, and then I'll repost it. But it's old school mental toughness compared to new school emotional intelligence and the pros and cons of each. And like you see the pendulum change on where we used to be suck it up and get it done, no feelings, no emotions, suppress that shit down and focus on the task. And by the way, that is very important sometimes when you're at war or your physical safety is under threat. For sure, there's a time and place for that. But generally speaking, in today's day and age, we're pretty lucky. We have a lot of systems in place to deliver our food, maintain our safety, and of course, anything's possible anytime. And there are dangerous situations, but you've seen a shift toward emotional intelligence. But as with anything, it can become too much, and then you have the stereotypical snowflakes, where everything that affects your emotions is bad, and your psychological safety needs to be guarded like your physical safety. There are pros to both, and there are cons to both. But my wife is really good at talking about emotions, not only for us, our feelings or our thoughts about those natural responses that we have to stress, and then labeling them really well, talking about managing them differently, particularly with our kids. And again, it applies for me. It's recognizing when I'm emotional, pausing, intervening appropriately so I can get back to rational and effectively show up in ways that are important. Never
Hmm.
ending battle forever.
Yeah, forever, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
we talked about paradox. I don't think before we went live, but that's it too, And I think it's. I find myself as as a mom. We haven't had a dad in the house for a few years now, and having to wear both of those hats, I think, has actually there are times when I feel like maybe my kids have missed out on some of that kind of typical maternal nurturing types of things, but I have gotten so much better at sifting through information and emotions, labeling them like you're talking about. Man, how do I, in a positive way, manage that, but then make decisions from a real logical kind of aspect? And I think that has taken some maybe typical emotionality out of the parenting. I don't take things all very personally with them. I can kind of see that, but also they're not managing my emotions. Their emotions are the emotions that we're focused on, which I think you want empathy in your kids and you want them to care about you, and that's an important thing to foster. But for the most part, this is the time for them to figure all that out and get things, real settled and healthy. Um, it's interesting. Man, there's so many things, right?
So many.
Yeah.
And you just said something that's important too. So like my wife and I talk about this. So I'll go back to my 5-year-old Sam. He has this identity right now of being a hero, being a helper, being selfless. And I very much am tied to those identities. I'm a protector, I'm a provider. And beautiful, great. We're altruistic. As with anything, that can come with a cost when over applied. There is no 100% good, 100% bad when it comes to these attributes of these concepts. And we make sure we talk to them pretty often about like, hey, if mommy's having a hard time or if daddy's having a hard time, you don't need to suck it up and go clean up a room or a mess you didn't make. Like it's really helpful, but like don't like sacrifice yourself because someone else is having a hard time. And it's ironic that we're talking about like, hey, Kyle, shut up and listen to yourself too, or listen to your wife because I'll do that. Sometimes I'll emote not only for the small stuff, but in trying to preserve my wife from having to experience the same stressor because of
Mm,
the hard pregnancy that we had, or trying to preserve the peace right now with my baby girls. She's sleeping, or letting them get rest because the nights have been hard. Like trying to protect these environments that she's already said, like, "Hey, I'm napping down here in the living room for a reason. I know I might wake up. Like, it's okay." Like, and also, by the way, stress is inevitable. These stressors, and I can't prevent that from happening to them. But because I care so much, I misapply these identities sometimes, not only at my own risk, but sometimes it affects my
it's
attitude and
just,
ability to keep showing up. And
yeah,
so, interesting there.
yeah, over functioning.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's noble, it comes from the intention is noble for sure. But yeah, I think you're right. Some of the greatest qualities that our kids can have can end up, well, we worry. I worry, is somebody going to take advantage of that? Or I mean, I think about Scout, she's probably the kindest soul I've ever met. She's really forgiving, and she's had to develop a muscle that is less that. In order to have healthy relationships, because you can't be a doormat to have a healthy relationship. But how do you develop that without crushing the goodness that it is? Because she will make, a wonderful partner. She's a fantastic friend, and a great sister because she has that kindness in her. And so you also, a lot of times I think that we are the only people in the world that are going to teach them these lessons, and that's just not true. And a lot of times the world and the people in it can do a better job of teaching them things than we can.
And even the
So,
hard lessons too, like, it's probably
yep.
better if the world teaches that, and you don't want it to happen, but again, if physical safety is intact, and by the way, you can't always control that when they're outside the house now, which is terrifying, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
But
wait till they
when
drive. Yeah.
I know my oldest is gonna be one of the most challenging ones for that. She is an amazing personality, extremely sarcastic and funny, but man, is she about to be 8, simultaneously 18. She can
Yeah.
give it to me like no one else can. She is very, strong in her word, and, it'll be interesting, when we talk about having her environment that is new, being a beginner, and trying to learn this skill that is stressful. It's gonna be a good challenge. I'm looking forward to it, but
Yeah.
not anytime soon. I'm excited for another
Right.
for another 8 years.
Well, and I start to feel like I'm really old. People used to say these things to me, and now I say these things to other people, and I think, "Oh god, not good.
Now you mentioned something earlier that I did want to ask you about. Like you kind of felt like you were wearing two hats, of course, and that you 10 years ago went through a divorce, and for a large part of it, you've been the sole single parent of your two girls. Was there like again, I'm shocked to know that you've only been writing on this topic for about a year. I know you've been thinking it, you've been living it, and probably cultivating these ideas, and maybe even writing beforehand, before you made it public facing, at least. But the way you write it, and holy cow, only for a year. But obviously living it intentionally, or maybe not intentionally sometimes, and figuring out as you go because we don't have it all figured out. But when it came to the traditional roles, or the roles that maybe they were used to in your family, like the paternal versus the maternal hat, how did you have intentional ways of balancing that, or how did you manage that?
No, and I honestly, it's probably been. I mean, I've loved the last 10 years. And so I have no regrets about anything. And we've really built this fantastic life. I think the time that I have, or the times that I have felt the loneliest, or the things that have maybe stung the most, have been times when how people interact with us, or even with my kids, if they knew that there was a dad around the corner, probably wouldn't have happened. And so I think it's been it's been tricky. I mean, it's been a real balance. I think, I also know so many people who grew up with a single parent and they're awesome. I think, was it Sam that was talking about being
Yep, yep.
with his, yeah, his mom.
And his mom and and girls, like he had all girls around him, and I had
Yeah,
no idea. And
yeah,
how cool,
and
how
how
amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing. So I think, you hear stories like that. I had to get over, I think, initially feeling like I had let them down and their life was gonna be insufficient, and their dad has been in their life to a degree at different times. Um, but I think in some ways, I don't know how to say this. I don't wanna be sensitive about the way that I say it, but it's sometimes better to not have something that's not well or healthy than it is to have a presence. And so, again, I think there are times when I probably didn't come at things as soft, and I definitely, I mean, I'm very, very cautious about sharing my own emotions with my kids. And I think it's important that I probably do more of it. But one of the biggest things for me is I don't ever want them to feel like they need to take care of me. I have my people, I have my system, their job is to be kids. And that was really important initially. They were young. And so I think they've seen a more stoic, um, parental figure on the mom's side than they probably would have had we been an intact kind of, family in that way. But I don't think they turned out bad. So I think, life hands you crazy stuff and you do the best that you can. And I'm sure, I mean, I'm because our kind of family blew up, I grew up and healed in some ways just like they did. And so there's been a lot of reciprocal communication, and I've been very, very open about I have a lot of deficits, and I'm not under any, misconception that I'm really great in areas that are lacking still, or that I'm still healing from, or still trying to figure out. And so um, I think even if there are some ways that they've gotten the short end of the stick, there's openness, I hope, and believe that they'll be able to say, "Hey, this kind of sucked for me in this way," um, or we need to go back and revisit this because this didn't go the way that it should have gone. And I'm totally open to that. There's a lot of that available. So,
Powerful. And you've written again beautifully on so many topics with parenting, but you talk a lot about, of course, we all sometimes inherit and maybe project without conscious awareness how we were raised,
yep.
and maybe have our own issues with our own parents, and circumstance, time of life. And again, there was old school cultural aspects of parenting then versus new school aspects of parenting now. Social media has a whole new flair, judgment, stats, all these things that happen these days about what we can or should be doing because of what's trending in the news that is not representative of the world. It is a new world, and we operate as parents now in a different environment than our parents did. But no one's perfect, if you didn't know. And of course, you know that. But you write on the topic that we try to do better than the generation before us, which of course we want our children to do the same thing. I'm curious, what was your childhood like? And did you start, like, what kind of lessons were you learning before you even became a mom? Um, and how did you become so awesome?
Oh, it's so kind of you to say. Like, I'm barely making it through the day. Um, I think, my parents both they're from Montana, both of them small town, central Montana, and, my dad's parents were both deceased by the age of 12. So he, didn't have a real grounding, childhood, lots of loss. Had a younger sister, older brother, and my mom had a pretty chaotic upbringing as well. Um, Her mom was actually a journalist, so that's kinda cool. We've got a and my daughter's now writing for something, so it's definitely in the DNA somewhere, but I would say to their credit, I mean, what they overcame. My dad ended up being a physician. He was a psychiatrist and then retired from psychiatry and went to work for the DoD on mental health outcomes for the last part of his career. And my mom was a family law attorney. And the idea that the two of them, you know, what they made of themselves, I guess, it could have gone any way that possible. And so, really proud of what they accomplished. They did it out of grit. I mean, pure and simple. Like they just slogged their way through it. Um, and so, in a way, I had a totally different childhood than they did, and I grew up just outside of Seattle on the east side, and um, pretty privileged, really, and so I what they came from, I have an appreciation for, but never experienced, on my own. But, but I would say they're old school, and I think they are definitely I mean, resilience is a big thing. My dad loves to call Finley resilient, and he's not wrong about that. I've had to sort of come the other way. It's okay to pause. It's okay to stop. It's okay. Not everything has to be hard. And sometimes the harder choices are indications that that's not the right, place to be. And I think it probably that mentality, not that my parents ever would have wanted me to be in a relationship that was harmful to me. They never would have wanted that. So I want to be really clear about that. But I think that mentality that I grew up on of work hard, work, kept me in places a lot longer. And I've written a couple pieces on quitting confidently. I think there are times and places where best you can to stay, and then you gotta go. And so I think I there's so many. I mean, they're incredibly generous, and I think I'm really proud of that. My dad speaks about his own dad, who he didn't know for very long, but as being generous and known for that. And um, I think that's we very much in on character that I was raised on that. Do the right thing, take the high road. You know.
I don't know if her internet cut out, but I'm going to talk for a second about what she was saying in case she can hop back on. She was talking about old school authoritative parenting, hard, do hard things, work hard. And my parents had a blend of that for sure. They were definitely raised that way. They both came from uh, larger families, unique circumstances, and like any other family, a host of challenges. But that old school mental toughness mentality often comes across as you raise your children through grit, making them do the hard things now. But ironically, when I find myself wanting to impart that on my kids, and then I ask myself, am I having them do something hard for the sake of my own comfort? So, like, if they're having a hard time, do I keep pushing them to have a hard time so I myself can feel comfortable because I'm projecting this quality in them in situations that it might not make too much sense. And I, uh, I have a hard time with that sometimes because I take that pause that Aaron talked about and think about, is this the moment to try and teach the skill of grit, resilience, or sucking it up? And oftentimes, it, it's it can be maybe for a moment, but if they're having a hard time or if it's unrelated to the situation altogether, sometimes doing something that is a little bit more sturdy, yes, you don't let them just get away with whatever they want and make you a doormat. But my ego gets in my way sometimes in my parenting where I will try and encourage grit rather than make myself be uncomfortable. And it hurts sometimes to just suck it up when my son is so out of line and doing the same thing for the fifth time that day. But staying emotionally regulated feels hard rather than blowing up and then shutting something down with fear based parenting. That is a challenge for me, and what Aaron writes on beautifully is a challenge for so many people. Um, I think she joined back in, so I'm gonna try and see if I can invite her back in.
And she's throughout the entire year continued to show me that she can be trusted. And so even if I don't know that I'm totally answering your question, but I just feel like every single time something comes up, it matters about the kid, it matters about the season that they're in, it matters about what season I'm in, and so I just it's constant evolution.
You answered with the best question that you can give to most. I'm sorry, the best answer you can give to most questions, which it depends.
Yeah.
It's context dependent, and we talked about the phases of life yesterday. And my kids in general right now for 7, 5, 3 and newborn, even if they were all the same age, they're going to be different kids. But phases of life will dictate certain parenting methods. But then even within that, like you said, the phase of life. How about the phase of the day? And how they slept last night, or if they're hungry, just so many of these other factors that may change your approach to necessitating maybe leaning toward authoritative more so versus permissive. And like I think of the old school, like have them be seen but not heard. And then maybe the new school stereotype of just unruly, no discipline, only heard, and they're running crazy. And of course, you don't want either of that. Like you don't want to suppress someone's identity and make it all fear based, where they're just little military soldiers, even though they're 5 years old. And then you also don't want them to just be left to their own urges and inability to learn from different contexts. So, like the harmony between those two, it does depend. But asking yourself that question, leaning on each day cognitive flexibility and different perspectives and approaches to a situation and child, it's simple but not easy. It is
No.
extremely difficult and good.
Yeah, well, and you used the word team yesterday, and I think that really is what it's about. I mean, I think obviously with smaller children, it's difficult, but asking them, "Hey, what do you need?" We do that. I mean, well-adjusted adults ask each other, "Hey, what do you need? You need me to be in this conversation for you." And I think if we can start that conversation, while they may not have the words or they may not be able to articulate what it is they need, they can begin to think about what do I need. And I think it gets where I see parents go I kind of off the rails most often is when we can't see our children as individuals. And so building those muscles and starting that language, when you do then have children, in their, the tweens and the teens, they can easily say to you, "Hey, I don't need this right now, but I need this from you right now." And it's a compromise and it's a conversation. And we make, step up and say, "Well, I'm the adult and this is really what we need to do." But most often, I think they're pretty good about telling us what they need, and we may be guessing in the wrong direction, if we're not asking the questions. So
I was talking to Mary Kate last night about our conversation and about this topic right here where we would pick back up. And as an audiologist and provider, I think about when I work with patients. In school, I remember this; it stuck with me, and I really think about this every time. The word compliance, like, and that was big. Like, yes, we want. Actually, no, we don't want patients to comply with our recommendations because if we're just forcing them to do something that they don't fully understand or maybe aren't comfortable with, one, it's not going to be done well. It probably won't happen at all. And you're fracturing that relationship and any credibility you have behind those. So we would use the term adherence. And I was talking about compliance versus adherence with Mary Kay. She was like, yeah, I get that in the provider setting, but I actually like the word cooperation a little bit more when it comes
Mhm.
to kids. And you just mentioned that. So it's a team based approach. It's finding compromise. What's their perspective, explaining that why, understanding that why simultaneously on both sides at the level that they're ready for. So you can lean toward connection rather than control. And man, I talked about James yesterday, my 3-year-old. Of course, he's all heart. There is no executive function right now, so he is all emotion. But when I can challenge myself to stop, get over my ego rather than like label him like he's trying to take advantage and push the lines right now. Like I don't do that every day in my realms. But rather than starting to label these things, no, he's a 3-year-old and he's feeling a certain way right now and emoting for that reason. Pause, empathize, and then connect. Some of the most beautiful moments that I've had with this little guy, that's what he's craving. He's craving connection.
Mhm.
He's craving to be heard and understood. And it's funny how rather than me leaning toward fear-based or authoritative parenting, which can sometimes more acutely and quickly stop a moment, but am I teaching any lessons there? Am I connecting with him? Or am I actually disrupting that connection and trying to just make myself feel better? So it's funny, we were raised in some gritty atmospheres, but now we apply parenting solutions sometimes that makes us feel better rather than the child for a
Yeah.
short-term solution rather than the opportunity and challenge that is that connection. And every time, which it's happening more and more, and he is attached to my hip. He's the first face I see when I wake up, the last voice I hear before I go to sleep because he's talking to me as he goes to sleep. Um, those connection moments, they're the absolute best. And
Mhm.
he's all heart. He's a heart of gold. And you forget that when you get stuck in the rut of the day, and you make these children emergencies more urgent than what they are. They're opportunities.
They are opportunities, and connection is such a big deal. I mean, that's really it right there. I mean, at the end of the day, I talk a lot about like how do you stay close while you let go. It's my big theme. But I also think you mentioned it in there. It's intrinsic motivation is the goal. As I'm talking to my 18-year-old who's heading up to college, whatever path she takes, she owns it. And I said to my 20-year-olds a year ago, you are not accountable to me for the life that you create. And so the earlier we can, establish, I think, in our kids the freedom to be fully themselves and while doing, well, with guidance, I mean, I think it really, there is that natural connection that is made because they do understand that you're on their team and you are rooting for them and you're celebrating them as, who they are and you want to be connected to them not because they're a reflection of us but because they're their own self. And I think that's different in, I think, the older model of parenting where how can you fit into, who we are and what we've got going on here.
Correct. You're this person. This is how we operate and follow the SOP and standard operating procedure. And there is no standard operating procedure for parenting. And if you do somehow think that you've mastered that with compliance, I can assure you, eventually, maybe until they get out of the house because they are really compliant and listen to those rules well, or they're doing stuff behind your back. In my experience, from my friends who were raised more in that household, I was not. My parents actually did have some flexibility more toward one side or the other based on different phases of our life. Pros and cons to everything, of course. I was definitely a little shithead and took advantage and snuck out and did things against the rules when I wasn't supposed to. But they approached with a lot of empathy and love and support, even when I would make those mistakes and then try to right the wrong later down the line. But yeah, the flexibility is so important. There is no
Yeah.
their SOPs are phenomenal for business. If you try to establish that in your life, in a relationship, particularly with children, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Well, and I think really it's more about it's character and values. And that's if that's the undercurrent for all the conversations and all the interactions and all the decision making, then you're good to go. Yeah.
It's so funny you say that because that's exactly what I go to first when I'm working with people and anything related to resilience, whether it's through Substack, in the military as a leader, or in general. Just when I have these conversations about resilience, let's come first to what are your core values?
Yeah.
What is your why? Do you even reflect on that why? How are your actions aligning with that? And what are your current strengths and weaknesses as far as the skills that is your character? Because I think we're a culmination of our skills, and skills require time, effort, intention, varying intensities based on where you are in life. But yeah, everything that we do is a culmination of our past experience and developed skills for lack, sometimes for better or worse. And if you're letting your character and your skills just happen passively, it's probably going to be less than ideal. And we do get to be a guide to our kids growing up. But man, it's Becky Bailey, I believe is her name, another great book on parenting. She's a teacher who then applied a lot of these methods that she learned in the classroom over the years for behavioral management, for lack of a better term, for connecting with kids and helping them develop into resilient adults. And chapter one is, of course, individual resilience. If you can't manage yourself in these hard moments, which are inevitable and going to happen all the time, everything else falls apart. So I don't care how great your skills are. If you don't operate well under stress, I promise you're going to be stressed. And if you fall apart there, you're not going to have any consistency. And one of my wife's favorite posts of yours, which absolutely are one of mine too, is you had a powerful piece recently on the power of consistency and just showing up. And days will be different. The phases of life are different. But if your underlying concepts are consistent, and then you can come back to them when you get away from them, man, there's power in that because you keep the same language, the same lessons happening, even when you falter because of a bad day on any side of that equation.
Well, I think it's wild to me that adults and parents don't connect that as a crucial element of parenting, because I think we think about any kind of job. If we have a job description and we know what the expectations are, then we can participate in whether we're successful or not. But this inconsistent idea, I mean, there's nothing more dysregulating than an inconsistent environment in any form. And especially for these little brains who really, I mean, just by nature, want, they crave and love us and admire us and respect us without us doing anything at all. And that's sort of the default 99% of the time. And I think the greatest gift we can give them is for them to know that home and our relationship with them is it's safe and it's consistent. We always know what's happening. And my worst days are days where I act outside of what my kids have come to know and they rely on, as me. And it's a way for them to know when now as they're older, when they should come to me and when they shouldn't, I mean, they know how. I remember my 20-year-old when she first went off to school, and she was sort of avoiding me on a situation because she knew what my response was going to be. That becomes an indicator for them, and they get to determine whether that's the decision that they want to make, and even come to be able to articulate why they're doing something different. But consistency, it's so easy to not think about it and be intentional about it, but man, it's a game changer.
Yeah, we mentioned SOPs don't apply to parenting. So the reactive based processes, it's not going to work because of how different a day can be, how different a child can be throughout phases. But in relation to business, where SOPs are effective, not in parenting, on the front end, proactively position descriptions, understanding your roles, knowing the mission statement of the family, knowing the why. You did a beautiful job answering how you were dual hatted after your divorce, and probably in many ways before it when things were tough at home, in ways that you were trying to respond to a difficult dynamic. But you mentioned that you told them that you're the kids. I'm the parent, and you define those roles really well. And you found a way to work through your unique circumstance, but while making sure they understood the roles in that equation and then giving them the autonomy to operate within those roles and having that understanding up front and then the freedom to operate within it so you can effectively guide them as a parent for progressive improvement. It's such a beautiful thing. So there is a lot of things that we can do related to business on the front end proactively. It gets harder reactively to have an SOP or anything business like because of how unique the environment might be and the kid might be day to day.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It's yeah. Well, even yesterday with the internet going out, I thought this is really timely and fitting. I'm talking about parenting, and no day is the same. You just flexibility, man.
100%. And you got to have it. And I mean, that is in many ways kind of the underlying tone of the five myths. And I know we talked about it briefly yesterday, but I'd love to come back to those myths. I actually wrote them down just so we could riff on each one a little bit, and talk about it more and kind of how it applied to your life, maybe how it applies to mine or whatever comes up. But that, I mean, we started talking with how you love uncertainty. And when you feel certain, you know you're probably going down the wrong path. And that reminds me so much of your first myth, which I should have had this all figured out by now. Or I should just have this figured out in general. Like somehow you're ready to be a parent, even before the kid's born. I know I was not ready for four when Lucy came. I wasn't ready to be a dad when Evelyn came. Like I'm every day is new. I'm not fully prepared for it, but I believe I have the attributes and skills to respond to it. But I'm not certain that I have it figured out in any way. I barely have myself figured out. I don't, let alone Mary Kate, my wife, or God knows my kids who are changing every day.
How do you feel like with that myth, how do we as a culture, as fellow parents, break that down for people and get rid of it? I mean, I don't know exactly where it came from, but I, I don't know how to get that across to people in an effective way.
The beautiful thing about your myths is they're all interrelated. So I could relate it to number two because it does seem like these days that everyone else has it figured out. There are these tenets of parenting, these hard and fast techniques that can work. And you saw me probably a while ago in the comments saying one of my favorite books was by is it Emily Oz shoot Chris
Oster.
Oster, thank you, Emily Oster or Oster.
Yeah, she's great.
She has three different books, different phases of life. The one that I read and loved was Crib Sheet. So she's an economist. She looks at data and she pulls solutions from it. And she looked at all of these paradoxes and dichotomies of how you quote unquote should be parenting these days. Do you breastfeed or formula feed? Do you have one parent stay at home or both parents work or single parent home worse than a dual parent home? And all these cool things to consider, co-sleeping versus not. There were so many, and we all jumped to these conclusions that we think, oh, for sure, breastfeeding is going to be better than formula, and like just these assumptions that most likely align probably with our choices. Like, well, we're doing it the right way, so it's probably going to show up. Guess what? The end of each chapter, not significant difference as long as the parents were showing up and there weren't all of these like actual problems of drug abuse and the things that would not be related to the question. So when you control for all of those confounding variables, yeah, no significant difference between all of these things that we feel guilty for because life necessitates both parents work. And then you carry that guilt that you're not around as often as you could be. But if you care and you make up for it on the back end and you respond to your life with empathy for yourself, empathy for others, and showing up the best that you can for what you have for your kids, that tends to lead to the same outcomes at scale. So what works for you and your family? That's why I had that number three. Give a shit and show up.
Yeah.
Don't give too much of shit. And then don't give a shit about what others are doing as long as what you were doing makes sense for you and your family. That came from that book. And that was like the conclusion of every chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it fits with the unpopular part of things. I'm sure, I mean, people look at us and think, well, at first they think they know what we're doing, and how, and they don't, but I find I'm less and less involved in social media because this is not, I'm not doing, anytime I'm posting about anything, it's not for me, it's for somebody else's gain. They don't, they haven't seen all the work that goes into it. And social media is brutal for parents,
Right.
especially moms. I just think, we'll never arrive if that's the goal.
And what I love about your writing is like you don't write from like a certain standpoint. You don't write to give these techniques to have it all figured out to effectively parent. Like so much of what you write is vulnerabilities, and like writing on paradoxes and the fact that there is no one solution. And certainty is something that we seek in life, just as people. And that probably is the answer to your first question. Like we crave certainty. We want to check that box. That is
Good
good.
point.
So we don't need to think about it anymore. And if we can figure that out for the most important job that most of us take on and believe we have, which is parenting, we want to figure that stuff out so we can continue to do more with less and try to deliver the best that we can with what we have. But embracing uncertainty is such an opportunity. And I think there are so many domains in our life, which now we're getting to the resilience realm of embracing that skill of curiosity, knowing that you really don't know shit and no one else does either. We're all doing the best that we can with what we have. Of course, there's evidence based science, there's past experience, there's so many things that can help you come to a better conclusion to mitigate unnecessary risk for your life. But there is still nothing that you can be 100% certain of. And when it comes to a developing mind and body that you care so much about, yeah, being uncertain with every aspect of that, curious about who they are and what works well for them, showing up with that skill of curiosity can really combat our need to figure it out. We don't figure it out. Keep learning with them.
Right, just keep being curious.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think the way that I try to approach my writing, and I'm not always successful with it, but it's mindset shifts. Really, it's not. I'm not really trying to change any. I don't know what somebody else should do, but I do think that there are certain mindsets that are more helpful than others. And I think, and I'm definitely not trying to change anybody's kid. I'm out of that business. And I'm not trying to change my own kids. I'm just trying to learn about them and show up in my role to the best degree possible. And so I think it's all about how we're thinking about things, versus the actual behavior modification hacks, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Completely agree. And this applies to resilience again too. I don't think there is one
yeah,
way. There is no one strategy. There is no one technique. Conceptually, there are some things that tend to work. So when you think about past experience is going to help you with future experiences similar. Support systems in place, both perceived and objective, and develop strategies. Like conceptually speaking, based on your life, if you can fill those buckets with cultivating some support systems in ways that work for you, work on, if you don't have it already, gaining experience in a realm that may benefit who you want to be. And most importantly, developing strategies and skills that can apply across domains in your life. Excellent. And I'll write on these concepts because conceptually, just like with parenting, there are a lot of things that's going to help your approach. But this technique is not going to apply across the board. Breastfeeding is not going to work for everyone for a variety of reasons. Co-sleeping versus sleep training, what necessitates your situation, what allows you to show up with a rational mind effectively so you can care and respond to all the other adversity that's inevitable. There is no one specific way, but concepts can really influence techniques
yeah,
within those areas. And ultimately, what your writing does, and what I try to do as well, is encourage people to figure out those techniques. We'll give ideas, but what works well for you, heck yeah, get after that.
yeah, and then modify it, right? I mean, you're constantly giving us, here's your exercise, but yet here's the modification, here's another modification. I mean, there's no one size fits all ever. And even one technique may work today, but you're doing something different tomorrow because of a different external, implication or whatever it would be. So I think, uh, yeah, I don't, it's, I'm really curious to know, you're so practical in the way that your message translates. And is it just the testing of different concepts? What is that rooted in?
Uh, Um, so for the resilience stuff, I've been doing it for well over a decade now. Actively like participating on the team I was formerly trained in for 12 years, actively teaching it for now 10, which is crazy. I guess I'm getting older, but cool. I've been thinking about it for a long time, reading on it, and most importantly for me, trying to develop the wisdom of executing some of these first concepts, philosophies, but then specific techniques. And almost always, anything I write about when it comes to like a particular skill challenge or anything, I've done it myself, and I've worked with other people that have done it. And there's going to be variability on it. I feel like every time I talk about any concept, any technique, give a brief, I start or at least weave in the quote by Bruce Lee: absorb what is useful,
Yeah.
discard what is
Yeah.
not, make what is uniquely your own. Because what works for me may not work for you. There's all the knowledge in the world out there, all the resources in the world. None of it means shit until you start applying it to your life to develop your own wisdom. And that process of actually going from, I don't know if this is going to work for me or not, trying it out and giving it a fair shake, by the way, not one time, oh, that sucked, I'm not going to do that again. Like, no, we all suck the first time we try something. But that's why I love like these monthly challenges that I do, giving yourself enough time to be consistent in a particular domain to see what the benefit may not be. And even if there is benefit, does it apply well to your life? Do you want to keep going with it or not?
Right.
There's so much through the process of experience to help you speak to these concepts. I mean, theories are awesome, but I'm not very good about talking about anything I haven't done myself or been in the arena with. So if you make me talk on a topic I've never experienced, I'm gonna have to prep quite a bit, but I'm also not gonna feel comfortable giving you any recommendations or solutions. But you can make things more practical when you do them yourself. And then remembering if you've taught other people how to do them, like, oh yeah, this person may need to modify in a certain way, dial back exertion. Like, how can we make it manageable at scale? And that has come with a lot of reps with a lot of people over time. Because rather than writing like, here's how I did it, who gives a shit? I'll share how I did it, but who cares? Like that's not gonna matter for a lot of other people who are not in my place in a variety of ways that I'm writing about.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you have a real gift.
Thank you. Right back at you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
we talked about your third myth, which was one of my favorite ones. So, my kid's crisis is not urgent. That's one of my biggest opportunities. And I talked about how like not only do I sympathize with the little guys and girls that I care most about in this world is having a hard time. So therefore, how can I fix that hard time? Which offering help where it is not asked for or beneficial is not helping. But oftentimes, I'm also trying to like safeguard. I talked to Mary Kate about this a while last night too, and she had some great questions for me that, of course, open up other doors. Have these real conversations like you talked about yesterday regularly, and then you realize different perspectives rather than assuming that you're doing the right thing because you care about this person. You're trying to prevent adversity for them. Like, no, are they in a good place? Are they ready to tap in? Or rather, don't even have them tap in. Tap out yourself. And you ask that great question. I don't tap out. And that is, but I write about that the skill of asking for help, even when you don't need it, empowers others. Now, don't ask for help from someone who's
Yeah.
not ready to offer it, not able to offer it. But I could get much better asking for help when it comes to parenting rather than thinking I'm protecting my wife from experiencing a hard moment.
Well, and I think it's a gift to everybody else around too when you're asking questions. You're asking questions, they're free to ask questions. It's bringing in more humility, and it changes the culture of even, the other parents that you're in living life with. We do such a disservice by not being vulnerable in that way, and it really isn't. I mean, think people see it as a weakness, but it really is a strength. How many times has some? It just takes a little bit of courage for somebody to say, "Oh man, I royally messed this up," or "Hey, does anybody have a good idea about this? Because I have no idea where to start." And it starts this whole conversation with the collective group of people, and you realize we're all more the same than we realized, and that's how we learn, is bouncing different ideas off of each other.
And we all have something to offer at different
Yes.
strengths and weaknesses. And I mean, here's an example. You tell me who's strong. Somebody who sucks it up, doesn't speak, goes on autopilot, and keeps managing the stressor with a poor attitude while their performance degrades more and more until they blow up on everybody and then they have to get help because it's degraded so much. Or the person who recognizes that I'm pretty stressed out, I'm thinking and acting a little emotionally right now. How about I tap out and ask for help? Even if it is chaotic, even if the other person experiences a little bit of stress, but you manage it together, you repair and you get through it together, and you get back to function and recover quicker. Of course, asking for help for is resilient. Recognizing that you're not in a good place, that empowers others, but it also empowers yourself. You got to know yourself. And just sucking it up until you break. That's not strength. I mean, it's misguided strength at least. Like you like the idea that you can continue on when things are tough. You want to train that, but it doesn't need to be trained in parenting in particular. That's not helping anybody.
No, and it's such an indicator. I think sometimes we just try to force things, and there are times when that's not the right door to walk through if it's closed and you're trying to beat it down. And so I think there is a misconception, yeah, that goes along with that as a strength, and it's actually, and even wisdom, and probably not
No.
wise to bring you
My
into that door.
I need to quit banging on that door and try to break it down. And no, it's my biggest opportunity for sure. It comes from a good place, but again, it's not serving anybody, and it's creating bad habits. And yeah, it's a self fulfilling prophecy, and it's something that my wife and I talk regularly about. And again, she tells me all the time I've gotten exponentially better with it over time. And it also, aside from parenting, just another old school mental toughness thing is you don't talk about how you're doing. You just keep doing until you get over it. And like that's great when you can solve things at an individual level early in the stress process and recover without needing any support. That's awesome. But when you let things ruminate and you suppress down and you start making assumptions and you start doing that martyrdom that we're prone to do, like I can keep going, and then you start projecting it at least internally in your head about like, oh, I can do all this and I'm not getting support. I don't need them. I'm fine. Like you get in these ruts, and that it's not serving you. It is not helping you, and I'm guilty of it time and time again, but I'm glad to hear that my wife thinks I've gotten better at it. I'd like to think I have, but it is my biggest opportunity for sure.
And do you think it's significantly different for fathers versus mothers? I mean, do you see that mothers have maybe more of an opportunity to discuss and be honest about stuff?
Maybe generally speaking. So, as an audiologist, my field is more female dominant than male. So, going through grad school, I'm just thinking of a few of the girls that I went to school with right now. They're going to get a doctoral degree. And the men that they dated is just an atypical dynamic when it comes to traditional roles, where they're the breadwinner and the man tends to be more the caretaker or doesn't make as much money, but dual working situations. And I saw at least a few of my closest friends taking on that role in the way that I'm talking about right now. So I think probably yes, generally speaking, because there's so much cool data and research out there when you control for other things and let people choose career paths. Men tend to be more of like the task-based, labor-based fields, where women tend to be more nurturing at scale on average. So I probably on average, just based on some of the research that I've read. But man, individually, there's always going to be variation, exceptions to every
Yeah.
rule. So it comes back to knowing yourself and what works well for you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I have to say, that's part of the reason why I absolutely love writing on Substack. The group of dads that is out there writing right now is awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing a really good job, I think, of breaking down some of those stereotypical hurdles
Yeah,
that need
a
to be
great writer.
overcome.
I know who you've interacted with a little bit too, and who I love, Gareth Wall, who just wrote that book, and Be a Super Dad. He does a great job of attacking some stereotypes because he is definitely, when it comes like the emotional intelligence side and talking about vulnerabilities and showing up. Like again, I riffed on this when the internet started getting poor yesterday, of like how hard it is internally for me sometimes to suck up my ego and not go fear based when my beautiful 3-year-old son is just having a hard time, but letting it feel like I feel like I'm enabling him by letting him have a hard time and just trying to connect rather than control. But of course, that's
Or
not.
indulging.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
just it's not. If I were rational, I know. As I talk to you right now, I know it's not true. But how hard it is in my core to manage that and show up for connection and cooperation. It's very challenging to not project and try to manage my own heat in a way of projecting. But man, when you can really embrace some of the stuff that he writes about beautifully, it can be so empowering. And then you start developing these habits and realizing the delayed gratification of that task. And hey, I love delayed gratification. So it's what a great opportunity for the most important job in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So number 4, I love everything about parenting. So I comment on this one, like, I can't wait. I can't wait to talk to you about how much parenting sucks. But it's such a good stereotype because I remember this was before I even no, I was dating Mary Kate. So before we got married, and so we didn't have children yet. But I was one of my teammates that I worked with, a little older. His daughter was a teenager, and he was just talking about. So we were talking about how I definitely wanted kids one day. I was excited for it, and she's the one, even though I hadn't proposed yet. And he was like, "Oh, it's the best job in the world. It's been my favorite part of life. I love being a father. My daughter has never given me a hard day in my life." And like I loved everything he said. And then he said that part. I was like, I mean, I'm ignorant. I'm not a dad, but that sounds like bullshit. Yeah, there has to be hard days, right? And I love the sentiment of it. I mean, she's getting ready to go off to school. You're in this place. It's like you look back on your life, and I think about even I was talking about Sam yesterday and just how we would freeze him right now if we could. 2 years ago, ask me that question. To be answering the same way that I am right now about my 3-year-old James. Like he deeply feeling child, as I mentioned, he would take you emotionally toward every extreme, both positive and perceptually negative. He would make you feel the deepest love and make you want to rip your head off because of how hard he would go in the paint when he was having a hard time. So the phases of life, once again, and it's just so funny, like how like when you show up and try to do your best, that you feel like this should be such a good thing and that it should be great all the time. And then you look at social media, everything's great all the time. No one's really complaining about their kids on social media or those hard days, but of course they're inevitable. And remembering that and allowing yourself, like, I can do things I don't like doing. And there's aspects of parenting that I'm not a big fan of right now, but it is in their best interest, my best interest, or it's a phase. And you don't have to love it. That's okay. And because I love doing hard things on purpose. There's nothing harder than parenting, and I'm doing this on purpose. I'm so thankful to be a bit dad, Why am I not going to show up with a good attitude like I would in the physical domain for exercise or in any other domain where I'm trying to work on improvement? What better domain than the most important job I've ever taken on that I love the most?
Absolutely. And I think I always get a little nervous about myth 4 and 5 and talking about it because I feel like the people that really need to hear it will struggle with it. And the people that don't need to hear it because they're, probably too much of one thing will latch onto it and say, see, I told you, like, this is miserable or whatever. And I think about how important it is to communicate as we're talking about this. It is really important to communicate that it's really hard because I think there's so much that comes from our kids learning that we can love something and still have it be difficult and challenging and grow us and all those things. But I also think it's really important to separate how we could talk about it. It's not that they are difficult, right? Or it's that I'm the triggers that it pulls up in me, or it's the endless loads of laundry, or the constant, mental load that we're carrying, all those things. And so I think, um, I don't know, I get nervous, I think sometimes when I kind of go off on these topics because I'm like, I'm hoping that it comes across of what I really mean by it. And I think you've obviously interpreted it the way that I mean it, but
Yeah.
there isn't anything that is worthwhile. Yeah. That isn't challenging and difficult. And so, and I think I actually had a note that was pretty popular and talked about, delighting in our kids. And I really believe that. I also believe this is grueling work, I mean, it is grueling work. And it doesn't mean that we love our kids any less or that they aren't phenomenal and that we would do it 100 times over. But it's one of those situations that you just can't possibly understand until you're in it. And I mean, there have been some seasons that I feel like have taken a few years off my life,
Yeah.
and then there have been some seasons where I never want it to end. So
And all of those seasons will end, no matter what your perception of time is. The days are long, but the years fly by. But I mean, sometimes the days fly by too when you're in those good phases, and then in a blink of an eye, they're in the next phase. So like we talk about freezing Sammy right now, and James can't wait for him to mature a little bit. I mean, that could be at a blink of an eye, a different solution based on just different life challenges and different phases of their life. I mean, Evelyn's about to turn 8, and in all of these activities. I was telling you before we went live just how brilliant she is and how beautiful it is to watch Mary Kate and Evelyn do homeschool and how much she's kind of taken to that, loves it, and the relationship connection that they have. She is the wittiest, funniest little girl that gives me back the sarcasm that I love to give people I love. I mean, her sense of humor is amazing. So we go on these dates and just like how she can riff on a topic and the personality she has, it's incredible. And but of course she's going to change too. And leaning on these things that you write about and some of these simple concepts of how can I emphasize connection even in the hard moments, knowing that while I love them deeper than anything else I love in this world, I don't always have to like what is happening. So
yeah,
like it's not that I don't like them. Of course I like them too. I don't like maybe aspects of the day or aspects of the approach I need to take to this challenging situation, but that's true of anyone. And again, the most worthwhile things in life, like you said, are going to involve a lot of challenge. Good. And thank goodness for that, because that is the work that you want to put in for the sustainable return on investment that you will get, like the conversation you had with your girls recently. That's the goal. How can you create resilient, independent human beings that you can stay connected to once, I forget the stat, like 70% of the 75% of the time you'll ever spend with your kids happen before the age of 12. And
wow.
there's going to be variation with that, of course, but that's something like that. And it makes sense. I mean, they're with us all the time, and that's challenging. But again, what a blessing. How can we make that worthwhile while parts of it are going to be really challenging?
Yeah, well, and I think you never really know, even too, with an individual kid, which season will be the most challenging. And I think I'm definitely on the other side of things, and I have to be reminded. I have to think back to how I was feeling when my kids were small, and the days were exhausting. I mean, they really were. I think more parents need to hear there's hope. One, I see you, and it is brutal, and two, can't predict the future, but I can tell you that it gets easier and it gets better. And like you're saying, you are having these dates with your daughter. I mean, you will continue to do that. And when she's 30, you will continue to have that bond and connection. And it, it's a long game, like you're saying. I mean, it is a long game, and we make these investments at the beginning, and we don't know what the dividends will be, but it's incredible. So
And attitude is a skill. So
yeah,
I love these intentional stress challenges that I write about, but I can remember I've done a lot of fasting challenges from food, from devices, from other things, but food in particular, managing the urge that is hunger, whether it's intermittent fasting or in some cases I've done some prolonged fasting for a few days, as many as 100 hours. I did one. But I know my buddy Michael Wundenberg's on here right now. He told me he wrote a comment. I need to talk about this. He's done a couple, and he said in response to a parenting note that he's done a couple 10-day water only fasts just to make parenting feel easier. Because it was in response to that parenting post that I mentioned, how to make parenting easier, do hard things on purpose. So I
yeah.
don't know if that was a joke or real because people have done that. I've experienced anything over 3 days. You're going to have some muscle loss. It's probably more detrimental than it is beneficial, but I love managing your urges. However, I can go dark. I can do some really difficult challenges and just turn off the world, go inside myself, and execute. If I'm doing a fast to better manage my urges and I'm still around my family for 3 days and I have a shit attitude, am I really benefiting from this challenge? So the first time I did it, my wife mentioned, she was like, you could tell you were hungry. You were a lot shorter during that challenge. And just her saying, I'm like, I need to approach this stuff a lot different. So my main intention needs to be maintaining a good attitude when I'm interacting with others, particularly the people I care most about during these intentional stress challenges. And so adding that intention in has been so beneficial because now when I'm feeling tired, when I'm feeling uncomfortable, when I'm feeling hungry, I can still try to encourage that skill of being the same Kyle that my kids and wife are used to. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Right. Well, and I love that because I think often parents try to do something to better themselves in that role and wind up kind of being assholes. Like that's not the then you've kind of undercut the entire thing, and it really doesn't have to do about that connection and relationship and what you're bringing to the table. And I love that reflection about that. I think it's
Yeah.
really important. I mean, we talk about it all the time. People who are working too often. Well, I'm doing it for you, but is that really what your kids are asking for or wanting or needing? And sometimes it's necessity, absolutely, but there are times when I think we make choices as parents or adults and sort of use it as the excuse, like, oh well, I'm ultimately doing it for you. Eh, are we though?
And this is character and values, like you said. This is why I love those exercises I mean, we all have different values, and that's absolutely fine. But reflecting on those values, because those will change just like your phases of life. So knowing what your current values are, first for yourself, and then having that conversation, of course, with the people you care most about to see if you're on the same page. But even more importantly, after that, when you talk about meaningful conversations, talking about your actions and how they're aligning with those values and how you're showing up for yourself and the people you love most in this world in relation to your stated mission statement as a family and your values. And if you do value quality time over money, but you're working 80-hour weeks when you don't have to, have that hard conversation, have that hard reflection of, are there opportunities for changing your approach to better balance the harmony that is a fulfilled life? And there is no right answer for that. There is no one way. But if you're not reflecting, you're not talking, I can guarantee there's opportunities.
Well, I think it's super important to model for our kids because I find myself now more as my kids are making all their decisions for themselves. I am more often than not saying to them, what makes you feel most you? What is more aligned with, how you show up? It's those. So if I'm not modeling it, I have no right to even say it. And there's no, that they're empty words because they haven't seen it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to exercise that and to communicate it and to teach it, but then also then to give them back that responsibility. They get to align with their own values as they are making decisions and finding their path.
And I love that question. What makes you the most you, and what
Yeah.
encourages you to show up? And that question for yourself is so crucial too, because God knows when we become parents, that's going to become our number one priority. That's going to become our number one role. And without question, a legit myth that happens to a lot of people, and even the phases of life and parenting where it necessitates you just need to show up a little bit more often, that becomes your sole identity. And you can get lost in that and forget who you are. So that's your fifth myth. working into that. And it was, there's no room for me right now. And yeah, tabling things, just like any other habit or anything else in your life, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't train a particular area and show up in that area of life, you're not going to be able to sustain what that was. It's either going to wither away or it's going to maintain or improve if you show up with effort, intention, and consistency. So I love the phrase improve or perish, because there is no middle ground. You're either improving or you're perishing in all domains. And most importantly, you can't show up with your family if you're not showing up for yourself. So that is crucial. And there is, I don't believe there's any purely selfless or selfish actions. So when you're executing self-care in whatever way you feel the most you, and I feel the most me, by the way, one way of playing with my kids and putting all things aside, letting them lead, getting out of my own way and being fully present and connecting with them, and the different ways that we love to play collectively or on our one-on-one dates. I went on a date with Sammy this morning. He got his first haircut outside of the house. Had an amazing time. Loved it.
Awesome.
Um, and I feel the most me during those moments. But I also feel the most me when I'm doing jujitsu, when I'm getting after it in the gym by myself or with my teammates in the functional fitness class I coach. There's a lot of domains in my life. I feel the most me when I'm on dates with Mary Kate, which don't happen that much these days. And I look forward to start planning more as as Lucy gets a little older. But there's different pockets of me that I love, and I need to address all of them at times that are most appropriate, but not forgetting about me. So that self-care piece, I mean, people get lost in like the mundane aspects of life and maybe get into resting, scrolling, streaming, and just turning off when you don't have to be on for your family. And we need rest. And there's nothing wrong with all of these different outlets that we have, unless that's all you're doing and you're not showing up for beneficial ways for yourself. I'd love to hear you talk about not only that last piece, which I just love so much. I think it came out yesterday morning, right before our talk, which is so well timed. But I'd also love to hear not only you talking about it, how you've executed it for your life as a single parent when they were younger, and then now.
Yeah, this is like another one that feel really skittish about, and I feel very defensive of young mothers, particularly because people start to talk about this, and they're like, "This is impossible," right? I mean, how on earth can I be thinking about myself when I'm inundated with these humans that are just needy, right? I mean, they're just needy all the time, and so again, it's a mindset for me as I talk about it, more so than it is, um, you know, practical tips. Because I think if we're disciplined in the way that we think about it, we will find ways to nurture ourselves in the chaos of it all. And it's, I also, if there are grandparents, friends, siblings, whatever, of people with new children, young children, children that of below school age, take an hour, take the kids. Don't ask, just say, I'm showing up at this time on this day, and you do whatever you want. Shower, take a nap, drive, walk, whatever. I think the gift of time alone, I mean, even as somebody who is now in the writing space, I can't really be creative and think unless I have like a certain amount of quiet in terms of chaos and responsibility. And so I think that would be like, honestly, don't send food, just give time. Um, but I think on a broader scale, I guess I was not great, I don't think, about taking care of myself, when my kids were little. I think I got really swallowed up in the role, and a lot of other things that were happening, and I was very focused on everybody else but myself, and I knew I needed things, but I didn't know what I needed, and, but I think that was probably a couple decades worth of thinking about other people before myself. So when somebody would have said to me, "What do you want or need?" I probably wouldn't have had an answer because that muscle had absolutely atrophied. Um, I think one of the big decisions that I made that I really wrestled with, and was afraid that I might be doing damage because I was doing something for myself that sort of separated myself from my kids, was going back to my maiden name. I didn't want them to feel like I was not a part of who they were. And yet in the divorce, just really felt like I needed to reclaim something that was mine. And so, something that I was proud of. And so, I made that decision, and it was really interesting because throughout the years, my kids have at different times made different comments about, them changing their name. And I think what I perceived at the time as taking care of myself and maybe potentially doing damage to them in some way ended up being kind of a lifeline for them because they've taken on, oh, we've got kind of two sides of our family, and I'm latching on a little bit over here. And ironically, and if my parents are listening, they're going to learn something new here. But both my kids just got their first tattoo with my maiden name on them, and I think it was something that was only for me, with the potential of it perceived, detriment to my kids. That I think has ended up being a real model for them that it's okay to do things for yourself, and they've benefited from it. Um,
I love it. And I love that both your parents are listening. Both of mine are too. So hopefully we're doing them
Are
proud.
Hi,
That's all.
Cindy.
With you and George. I love it. Um, how are you taking care of yourself, especially as you get ready to transition with to neither girl in the house anymore? That's going to be a big change for you. How have you been taking care of yourself more lately? And how are you thinking you may use some of the extra time when Scout is completely out of the house in just a couple weeks?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Mm,
I have a long list of things that are waiting till August,
yep.
and I've done that on purpose. I wanna be very available and very focused. We just moved, so it's been a really chaotic month, but now kind of have this little set time that I wanna be available. Um, I don't I'm very uncertain.
Yeah.
I don't know what that time will look like, and there are moments where I think it'd be great to have 24 hours by myself, and there are moments where I'm by myself for 2 hours and I think, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be my life," like, I don't know what this is gonna look like. So, I'm starting to make a list of things that I've had some interest in, put it onto the pickleball club and do some things like that that I, haven't. The school years have typically been pretty busy for us, with athletics and sports and things. And so, and that's been it's been my priority to be available. So I don't know. I said to Scout this week, I have to be really careful. I think I could probably work a lot. And that would be a real easy kind of default for me. So I'm going to have to really carve out some time. And I'm trying to do that actually even now. I just said to a client this morning, hey, just want you to know my weekends are my weekends. I got to go back to that. So, um,
Good.
I'm trying to be intentional about setting it up, but who
And
knows? I'll probably yeah, I don't know. Ask me in 30 days, it'll be a
I will.
totally different life.
I promise you I will.
And I'll be asking you, how
Yeah.
does your family look like to you?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I think about Mary Kate with number 5 too. So, like, without question, and I think, I'm based on your writing, I would assume this answer, but moms have a special connection with their children. Of course, they lived inside of them for 9 months, and that connection is I'm watching it live right now. Lucy loves me, but I'm just I'm second nature to the quarterback. So, like, I'm taking a break until when can I get back home, which is mom. The smell, of course, breastfeeding. It's funny. She'll like sleep with me, but when she gets to mom, she sleeps differently. Like she's fully relaxed. That safety zone, and that connection is lifelong. And um, not only on the kid side, but the mom side. And that understandably becomes an identity, for lack of a better term, maybe deeper than men could ever completely understand because of the nature of creating that life inside of you and that bond that you have objectively and subjectively throughout life. So without question, that's going to become your primary role. My primary role is father too, but I know that I don't know and I'm uncertain about how deep that role is as a mom. So challenging yourself in that domain of making that not be your only role has to be extremely challenging. And you can stack skills underneath. I like to think of like a pyramid. Like, of course, at the top, most people are going to say being a parent or being a spouse or whatever that may be for their most important relationships in their life. But the things underneath of that can feed into that. So, Mary Kate, for example, gardening, homeschooling, sewing. She writes, and sometimes she writes letters to the kids that maybe she'll never give to them. And she's a more beautiful writer than me, which is hilarious since I write in public. But I love her writing way more than mine, and her letters that she writes to our children regularly make me cry when she lets me read them. And I think back like when we were doing journal entries during COVID and sharing them with us, I'm reading her like, holy shit, you're such a better writer. But yeah, all these skills feed into her being a mother, but they are also opportunities to. Oh, and also she's one of the best chefs that I know. So she likes to cook food for our family, but she enjoys cooking. So like that is her time. It's not going to be she's doing it with the kids always. She gets space in the kitchen while we go play, and then she does something that she enjoys, which happens to be something that also serves her family. And I love that idea of like relating even these things like me doing jujitsu is not like you could say I'm trying to be a better protector and provider for my family, and I am. That is my why behind it. But if I were going off and training 5 times a week without my family and spend a lot of time away from them, it's really not feeding into my why. But I bring my kids with me every time. They're there with me when I coach. I do it with them, and I don't do it that often. It gives Mary Kate a break at home. So I'm always checking back in to see if like these ventures that I do that I enjoy that I didn't know if I would or not initially gave it a try like you might with pickleball. And then you do it long enough, like, oh, hey, actually, this does serve my soul. I do enjoy this, and it helps me show up better when those times present themselves to be a present mom when you talk to Scout and Finley or with them.
Yeah, well, and I love the idea that there's a line in yesterday's piece, and I'm not going to do it justice right now, but essentially, you're sort of we need to be rolling parenthood into our identity rather than protecting our identity from parenthood and separating them out. And I really believe that. And it sounds like your wife. Really, again, I'm going to reiterate it. She may be my first live, but I wish that we did more of that. It's not they're not unique and separate and apart. Let's just show up more wholly as ourselves in that role, and then not dim that light to that role of parenthood. I think that's the goal. I kind of want to go back too because I think it's important. I think we know the end is coming. Our children, we're going to be launching our children. That's the whole entire goal. And so if we can keep that, I think, in mind, um, we don't want to abandon something and then try to pick it back up. It's almost impossible to do, I think. And so what I try to kind of keep in mind, if we're looking forward, if we're looking outward, even, young children, they're going to be going to school. So let's start thinking 3 years ahead of time, or they're going to whatever, be in activities that are going to give us more free time. Let's start thinking about ways that we can foster so that we're not trying to catch up to something, but we're getting ready for the time when it does become available. And I think it gives us more hope too. It's something's not lost or unattainable. And we did that a little bit when my oldest was leaving for school. I said to my youngest was a little worried about what that was going to look like for her. And I said, well, let's take the year ahead to practice what that's going to look like. Each month, do something that's not connected to her so that you have a life that feels full. So when she leaves, you don't feel like you're abandoned. And I think that can be applied to parenthood in so many different stages and seasons too, of just preparing for the inevitable. No, life will throw you a curveball, and that won't be the inevitable. But why not? Why are we surprised when they leave?
Yeah, preparation through experimentation and experience
Yeah.
making. And I love that idea because yet we can say we're going to do all these things when that time comes. When the time comes, if you're not prepared in any way, the world has a million distractions for you. And it's very easy to never leave your house and have your plate full, even through just pleasurable activities because of how easy that is to do. And we evolved to pursue easy subconsciously. That's just how we are made. And there's nothing wrong with that if we are conscious of it and managing it effectively. I always try to be really conscious in my writing of like not poo-pooing on pleasurable activities or instant
Mhm.
gratification. Like I pursue that shit. I love a lot of different things that are stereotypically bad. They're not bad if approached in moderation with management and in a healthy way for you, because we can look at things that are physically healthy, mentally healthy, but we don't have a really good understanding of the spirit and the soul. And if it feeds your soul in a unique way that isn't compromising your physical health and your mental health over time, then who's to say it's not right for you? But if you're not doing and you're just sitting back, not thinking, not living consciously, subconsciously going about your whims, you can fill your plate really easily, but it's going to be less than ideal for sure. So I love your talk about just experimentation without saying the word ahead of time rather than up, it shows up, I'm retired, or the kids move out of the house. What do I do now? And some solutions may come to you that you're are not serving very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, you've been a mom for 20 years now, and you clearly are a deep thinker. I was shocked with just, again, how powerful your writing is, that you've been writing in public for a little over a year. Were you journaling, writing to yourself before that? You are a beautiful writer. So I know you're a teacher. What is like the origin of Erin Miller? It's wild with just how profound your writing is in the parenting space, that it's still relatively new for you, at least public facing.
Thank you. And I wasn't writing before. I
Okay.
mean, I did a little bit of technical writing and some blog posts for some employers and things like that, but I haven't really done any writing. I think it's I don't speak as well as I write. Everybody's like,
I
yeah, no
disagree.
kidding.
I disagree. Okay.
um, but I like to be real certain. I like to be real certain about what it is I'm trying to say. I think words have matter a lot to me, and so I have found writing to be incredibly helpful. Um, I generally leave a conversation, and then 3 days later, I'm like, "Okay, now I processed it, now I know what I wanna say and what I think," and so writing to me has been, um, really helpful in that way, but I haven't done any formal writing. Um, but I love it, and I really love the community that, I've built. I think people have been so gracious and generous, in sharing their own experiences and being supportive of me, and I mean, this is a ton of fun, I mean, and I think, we'll see where it leads, but it's been really cool.
And I love what you say about writing, because I experienced the same thing, but it allows you to say what you want to say and how you would want to say it. Like as we talk right now, we're saying some things that for sure we would both reword differently if we were
Totally.
controlling the script that was a post. I think about some of the quotes that I say longer than I spend on the entire piece, because I want to see, like, how can I formulate a sentence that really hits home to the point that I'm trying to make. I'm a big fan of mantras, and I love asking people about mantras and or quotes or anchors that they use in hard situations that helps them be more resilient, helps them show up more as a parent. And again, you're writing, it feels like mantra after mantra after mantra, just hard hitting sentences that hammer home the point that flows through the topic that you're writing about that day. I'm curious, do you have any particular mantras that you use in the past or now, that you tried that maybe subconsciously now call up, because you've said them so often, or that you would like to try and use more often in response to adversity, whether it's parenting or life?
Yeah, I don't know that I have any mantras really, but I have some quippy little parenting things that I say a lot, like we have some like, I used to tell my girls, and this was when they were in primary, elementary school, that we never leave a girlfriend in the bathroom, right? Ever. Right? You never leave a girlfriend in the bathroom. You're not responsible for somebody else's unhealthy emotional needs. That was a big one for us a decade ago, and it was over and over and over again. We still say it to each other. Where there's confusion, there's a lie. That comes from Scott Peck and People of the Lie. That's been a real big one for me. I don't need to pinpoint what it is. I need to understand. It may be that I am not being honest with myself. I've confused myself because I'm not being self reflective or clear about a situation. But I think I have gone through seasons where I felt very confused and felt like I needed to have an answer to something. Before I could move forward without just trusting my gut. I said to my kid this week, well, the red flags are there. It doesn't matter, where the origin is. Like, let's just trust that. So I think there, lots of little things like that. Life is difficult. That was my dad's a big Scott Peck guy, and Road Less Traveled was my 16th birthday gift. And, we're just kind of big fans that way. But I think so there's certain little one-liners that we use a lot, but,
I love one.
yeah.
And again, your posts are full of them. So, yeah, while I like, the myths are what have hit hard for me recently, and so just like, and for me to like absorb stuff, I usually have to like say it in my own way, because then I'll just pull it out of my memory better. But again, like if you're looking for empowering parenting wisdom, without question, they're in your post. But again, going back to our first question of why you named your account Unpopular Parent, and how Scout, your daughter, helped you create that, which I just love. But it's a lot of what we've talked about. Like, generational dichotomies from old school to new school. There are these paradoxes of what is right versus what is wrong. There's these concepts like certainty versus uncertainty, and as we've mentioned, that there is no one way. So you bringing these concepts in the fold and highlighting the paradoxes, and then giving examples within each and hard hitting mindsets that approach it from not a certain perspective, but from a if you're showing up and caring and delivering in this realm concept, you're going to be doing okay. But that means you need to attack these certainties that we tend to see in our culture, and that is not popular. But I know one of the worst things that you could call me is normal, and that's in any realm. And like if I'm a normal parent, it's not too hard to go out and look around of what normal is in a variety of ways. And if you want to be exceptional, you can't be normal. And if you want to be as great as you can be and what's most important to you as a parent, you need to be better than average, and that is better than your average, and that just means you need to reflect on this daily. You need to not show up passively, subconsciously. You need to challenge yourself in whatever way makes sense to you and your family to show up uniquely every day with the underlying concepts that you write so beautifully about. Um, yeah, it's just I love that name because you read your posts and it sometimes it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, and that's my favorite thing to read because I don't want to be told I'm doing everything right and be certain about this, we're good to go. And you start off the conversation with that, and just your account is so appropriately named because that is exactly what comes across. It
Thank you.
how to be less than popular, how to be more than average, and that is okay because you're doing it for the right reasons.
Well, thank you so much. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, if you're giving me the thumbs up, I think I'm doing okay. So,
Right back at you.
yeah.
We've now been talking for I can't believe it's already over an hour. We talked for almost an hour the other day. I could talk to you all day as we were talking before we went live. There's so many concepts, and it'd be fun to do like particular deep dives on certain
Love
areas, certain
that.
posts of yours in the future. But man, the future, hopefully, it continues as Scout moves out. One of your self care pursuits will continue to be writing, maybe even a few books one day.
I'd love that. That's the
Yep.
hope. Yeah.
100% again. Good Inside, my favorite parenting book to date, and the concept of just good inside is another thing. Like talk about parenting mantras, that's one that I use, and that is her whole point. Like children are good inside. They're separating their behavior from their identity, and like she does that with her hands when she talks about it. It's so true. We tie these behaviors to identities, and we do this with adults too. Most people are good. Most people are just having a hard time projecting, and of course the brains that don't have the executive function capability that are all primal, all emotional, are just having a hard time. They're not like
Right.
overtly trying to take advantage. They're good inside. How can I connect rather than try to control or go fear based? So I try to tell myself good inside all the time. But in the way that Becky Kennedy's book hit me, I mean, your post hit me the same way, if not harder. And I'm lucky enough to be a paying member of your account. And then those, as you say in your bio, go even deeper and even harder. And again, they don't make you feel comfortable sometimes, but it's always empowering. And if you're willing to avoid your own biases, your own opinions, your own beliefs, and just consider your perspective without it being like, this is certainly the way. But no, question these topics on yourself and how you're applying them. Those questions are what reveal the opportunities always. And you do that to me every time you write. Thank you
Thank
for
you. Really, thank you so much. I'm honored.
absolutely. Yep. Talk soon, Aaron.
Sounds
Appreciate you.
great. Thanks,
And
Kyle.
if you do a live with my wife, that would be amazing because you talk about intentional stress. Beautiful writer, but to get her to talk in public, that would be a heavy lift. But if it
Tell
would be
her
with anyone, it would be with you.
I'm coming for her. Tell her. She's forewarned here.
I love it. Have a great one. Take care.
Thanks, you
Talk soon.
too. Okay, bye-bye.